Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited to see you all uh, for our Miami Gardens Chamber of Commerce webinar entitled, Is Real Estate in the Caribbean a Good Investment? This is a good time for this topic, obviously. And we're going to hear from experts who are going to discuss the opportunities to purchase real estate in the Caribbean and the domestic, international business, and tax implications. And we have some incredible experts with a wealth of knowledge that they are going to share with us this afternoon. I'm Andre Williams, the president and founder of Miami Gardens Chamber of Commerce. We relaunched the chamber a few months ago, and here we are. I'm a licensed real estate attorney. I have a full service real estate law practice and title company. I'm also a real estate investor. So this topic is obviously very important to me too. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the Miami Gardens Chamber of Commerce. We have a very unique business to consumer approach for our members designed to help them grow their business and gain clients. We are a one-stop shop that offers digital marketing and IT support services toolbox at a highly discounted price to our members. Your membership also includes preparation of certifications, DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, Women of Business Enterprise, SBA, HUB Zone, and EWOSB. So we provide a host of certifications and provide support. We have management consultants, performance consultants that are teamed with us that can help you organize and grow your business as well. So let's talk a little bit about the chamber and our marketing platform. South Florida, as you know, is one of the most popular real estate investor-driven communities in the world, and we have access to all of them. Our newsletter reaches over 70,000 professionals in the Tri-County area, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade County. Our radio broadcasts, it's a podcast. It reaches 4 radio stations in Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Monroe, and the Treasure Coast, and it reaches over 4 million listeners. As I said, we have a broad network. I graduated from Harvard, so obviously my network is included. We have personal access to high wealth individuals in South Florida as well. So very excited about our panelists. Let me talk to you a little bit about the real estate market. They're going to talk about the Caribbean real estate market and some of the opportunities there. Let me tell you about the South Florida market, real estate market, if some of you all don't already know this information. South Florida home sales in 2023 fell by double digits from 2022. The median home price in Miami-Dade County is about $610,000 for a single family home, $410,000 for a condo. In Broward County, the median home price is $570,000 for homes for a single family home and $275,000 for a condominium. The prices in South Florida are skyrocketing and really not really affordable for most middle income family. It might still be attractive to investors, but obviously there's great opportunity in the Caribbean, and we're going to hear from our first presenter, our first speaker, John Bullock, who is the founder of Ushombi Incorporated. Ushombi Incorporated is the premier platform for Caribbean real estate. John is from Atlanta, Georgia, and is a United States Marine Corps combat veteran. My dad was also a Marine. In 2015, he took a job as a legal assistant at a law firm in Cancun, Mexico, which became his first exposure to the world of Caribbean real estate. And in October 2019, he launched Ushombi, a comprehensive platform for Caribbean real estate, which has grown every week and has amassed a large number of agents and other third-party service providers, all while providing value to the industry. And Ushombi was created to save property investors time, money, and headaches while connecting them to quality service providers throughout the Caribbean. And I'm proud to announce that the Miami Gardens Chamber of Commerce has a strategic partnership with Ushombi. So real excited to have John with us. John, you have the floor.
Thank you, Andre. I just want to thank you for having me today. As Andre said, my name's John. I have lived all over the Caribbean and have been involved in the Caribbean real estate industry since 2015. And a little over 4 years ago, I launched Ushombi. It's grown every single week. I'm so happy to be here, and I look forward to answering everybody's questions here at the end of the presentation. I made some slides for you guys so you can learn a little bit more about Ushombi, what is offered, and also a little bit about the Caribbean real estate industry. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Is that possible here? Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so as Andre mentioned, Ushombi is the most comprehensive and trusted platform for Caribbean real estate. What do I mean by comprehensive? I mean that Ushombi encompasses all the different aspects of the Caribbean real estate industry. So when I started researching and diving deeper into the Caribbean real estate industry, there was a problem. The problem was that it was a fractured industry. There was no one-stop shop, if you will, that an investor could go to and have all the different entities that they would need when it comes to purchasing Caribbean real estate. So then I developed the solution, which was to build a platform that consolidates all these different, not only investment opportunities, but the ability to speak with third-party service providers all on one place. So the purpose of the solution is to save Caribbean property investors time, money, and headaches while connecting them to qualified service providers. And time is hands down the most valuable resource that we have. And you don't want to spend your time searching through 10 different platforms just to find the one property that you're looking for. So what is the difference between Ushombi and these other platforms out there? There's really only a couple other active platforms for Caribbean real estate. A lot of them come and go, and they're here for a year and then they fizzle out. So these other platforms only offer properties. They all have the same business model. There's no value-based content, and they approach this multifaceted industry with a one-dimensional approach, which is just, hey, we have this property here, buy this one here, buy that one there. So Ushombi's value proposition is that there's unique content for buyers, sellers, agents, and third-party services. On Ushombi, all the aspects of the industry are catered to. Not only can you find real estate on Ushombi, but it's also an education and empowerment platform for the buyers as well. And it's an evergreen, adaptive platform with evergreen content. So if you're looking for an investment property in Punta Cana, you can also search the blog and the Instagram and our Medium account, our Facebook account, and all the different platforms that Ushombi is on to learn about the questions that you need to ask before you buy in an unregulated real estate market. That's just an example of the type of content and education that is on Ushombi. So Ushombi is the leader for Caribbean real estate. We have a multifaceted approach. We are the most comprehensive, all-encompassing platform for potential investors. It's an innovative approach to purchasing real estate. It's valuable for investors to spend their time on, and it's also educational. So here are just a few stats that I've put together for you guys so you can see how big Ushombi has grown. Right now, there's 230 agents from 155 brokerages across 30 countries on Ushombi. You can also see these stats on the website, and I'll be sure to put the website in the chat here when I'm finished. Over 1,100 properties, currently 4 custom home builders, 2 lenders, 1 coastal engineering firm, 1 international tax attorney, 11 real estate lawyers. And now these 11 real estate lawyers are all from 11 different countries in the Caribbean. And over $2.4 billion in total property value on the website. Another quick stat for you guys is that on Ushombi, there's over 500 properties that are priced at $500,000 and below. So there's plenty of budget-friendly properties spread out across the Caribbean, from pre-sales in Punta Cana starting at about $70,000 to $80,000 to land lots in the Bahamas priced at $30,000 right down the street from the airport in Bimini. So there's something for everybody there. So one of the great features that Ushombi has is, as you can see up here at the top, is the Caribbean MLS links section. All of the Caribbean countries that have an MLS, or I'm able to get a flex MLS for, I've grouped together here on the website and positioned it not only on the Caribbean properties page, but also on the home page. So that way people searching can just click and visit Cayman Islands MLS or Puerto Rico's MLS, have your pick. And this is the only place in the entire internet where you're going to have this grouping of MLSs for the Caribbean. Ushombi is active across 8 different platforms. And of all the Caribbean real estate platforms, Ushombi has the largest following on Instagram. This is a visitor breakdown that I put together. 90% of the traffic on Ushombi comes from North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So pretty much Canada on south into Panama and then the Caribbean. 7% of the traffic comes from across Europe. 1% in the Middle East, and 1% spread throughout Asia. And that gives you 99%. That other 1% is spread through Africa and South America. So what I've put together here is just some screenshots of the type of content, the educational and valuable content that I've put together. Some of this is generalized and some of this is specific. That way you can just get a taste of some of the valuable content that is on Ushombi. This is a recent piece called "The Truth About ROI in an Unregulated Market." Now, the reason I put unregulated market as opposed to a regulated market is because not all the markets in the Caribbean are regulated like the United States. Some of these markets, you can have somebody graduate high school on Friday, and then the following Monday, they have business cards made and they are a real estate agent. And that is absolutely terrifying. Here's some localized content about why you should invest in Punta Cana. These are just the introductory slides. I also help people avoid the scams and the fraudsters that are out there across the industry. This is definitely the dark side of the industry, and I think every industry out there has a dark side. But it's important that investors know about it and know what to be on the lookout for and what to be aware of and how to vet the agent, how to vet the developer, how to vet their custom home builder, how to vet the brokerage, so on and so forth. So this particular piece of content was about the insights that you need to know before you buy a pre-sale condo or pre-sale home. Questions you need to ask before you put down a reservation on something that's going to be completed in 2.5 to 3 years. This is another piece I created about the 5 reasons you need an experienced real estate agent in the Caribbean versus one that doesn't really have much experience, and the galaxy of difference between the two. This is hands down the biggest draw to Ushombi, not only on Instagram, but also on the website. This hands down is what brings the eyeballs to the website more than anything else. Caribbean, this format I have developed, Caribbean real estate under 200,000 US dollars. This is what brings the eyeballs. This is why Ushombi has just last month just shy of 80,000 visitors from uh, uh, Google. This pulls in the eyeballs. This and Caribbean real estate under $100,000. These are the biggest blogs that I have created, and the audience really responds well to these 2 features. So that about wraps it up. I would love to answer anybody's questions later on when Andre opens up the floor. But I hope that shed some light on Ushombi and everything that you can learn about learn on Ushombi. And thanks again for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, John, and that was great information. And I'm glad I shared with folks the information about our local real estate market. Median price of homes between $500,000 and $600,000. Obviously, if you're an investor, there's a lot of value in investing in real estate in the Caribbean. And John, you mentioned that some countries are more regulated than others. I always like to share the example of St. Martin. That's an island in the Caribbean for some of you all who don't know. But they are absolutely unregulated. There's a treaty between the United States and St. Martin, the Dutch side, the Netherlands Antilles. You can literally land in St. Martin. You can get a work permit, start working immediately, and you can buy real estate immediately. So they're completely unregulated. Their realtors are also unlicensed. So yes, John, you could graduate from high school and throw out your realtor shingle in St. Martin. So all the Caribbean islands are not as you know, you don't have such liberties in all of them, but again, there's great opportunities. So John, thanks again for your presentation. So real excited to hear from our next presenter, my friend John Hurley, who is an international tax attorney. We have great conversations around a whole host of things, but when it comes to tax, my eyes gloss over. So hopefully that won't happen today in your presentation. But let me tell you a little bit about John. During his 20-year tax career, he's represented and advised individuals, small and mid-sized businesses, as well as multiple Fortune 500 companies on a wide array of sophisticated tax issues in various tax disciplines, such as tax controversy, tax planning, international tax, and transfer pricing. He began his career in a law firm in which he primarily represented a large conglomerate multinational corporation. He's worked in tax departments of some of the world's largest multinational corporations, leading tax controversy authorities at the state, federal, and international levels. He's and state tax issues before numerous tax authorities. I'm so excited to have John here.
Thank you, Andre. I appreciate that. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, what I want to do here is I also have a PowerPoint that I'd like to share. So let me go ahead and pull that up.
Also with Lippis Mathias Law Firm.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much again for having me. And what I want to do is I want to focus on some of the tax considerations that one might want to consider when looking at potentially investing in real estate in the Caribbean and really anywhere internationally as well. It could apply. So to start with, I actually want to go through just some blocking and tackling of some general themes that you'll see when it comes to international tax. So first, you really have to look at it in two lenses. There's local country and there's U.S. tax. So whatever the local country jurisdiction is, you want to look at what their rules are. They will have their own tax rules, both on how they view the arrangements as well as the persons. And what I mean by that is, whether they're looking at individuals, corporations, fiscally transparent entities. You also want to understand their tax benefits. Usually the local countries will have certain tax benefits, whether it's deductions, grants, credits, that they're using to try to incentivize investors, both for economic growth, social programs, and so on. So you want to try to understand some of those benefits and how that might play into real estate investment in this instance. There could be some limitations as well for local country with regard to their laws. So how that real estate has to be held, whether that could be held by an individual, whether it has to be a corporation or some other type of entity. So you want to be aware of those things. So the best thing you can do there, in my opinion, bring in a professional. Look to a local professional tax advisor, legal counsel to help you with those rules. And hopefully, what you want to do is coordinate with that local country advisor with your U.S. advisor. So in this case, now kind of stepping down, you have the U.S. tax side. So that's local country. U.S. side, just so everyone's aware, when you're a U.S. citizen or a U.S. tax resident, you are subject to U.S. income tax on your worldwide income. So that's from whatever sources, regardless of where you may reside. And so that's important to understand because, a lot of times I hear people, contemplate whether or not they have filing obligations, if they're an expat, let's say overseas. And the answer is the general rule is yes, you do. There may be certain exclusions or exemptions to that. Mainly, if you have you're under the general standard deduction in the US, there may be times when you're not required to file that return, but even then there's exceptions to those rules. So you have to really understand those rules well. So the general rule is you're a US citizen. If you're an expat, assume you got to file in the US. If you want to get tax refunds, you want to get certain US benefits, which we'll talk about some of those in a minute. You're going to look to file that return to get those refunds and benefits as well. So on the US side, you're also going to look at what tax benefits you have in the US, deductions. If you're an expat, they do have certain benefits that may apply to you specifically with regard to being abroad. So you want to understand both the US deductions and credits you might be able to take, as well as what the US may offer as being an expat abroad. Again, same idea. Look for a U.S. advisor on the U.S. side for taxes. Have them coordinate with your local country advisor. Big question always comes up: double tax. Okay, fine, John. So there's local country tax. There's U.S. tax. I guess I'm getting hit on both sides then. So am I paying the same tax on the same dollar that maybe I'm earning overseas? The answer is generally, hopefully not. The U.S. is designed to have certain rules in place to try to provide relief from what they call double taxation. So specifically, as I list here, and you see, that can include your foreign earned income exclusion, foreign tax credits, and also you want to look to income tax treaties. And so kind of breaking those down a little bit, your foreign earned income exclusion, that's basically dealing with U.S. citizens and U.S. residents where they're qualified, meaning that they're overseas, they're meeting certain rules to show that they're overseas, and they're earning some sort of salary, bonus, some sort of active income from overseas. In 2024, there's an exclusion where they can exclude up to $126,500 in income. So that could possibly help reduce or even zero out their U.S. tax liability on that income. But again, there's qualifiers for that. We'll talk about that in a minute. In addition, there's foreign tax credits. That's basically where you're paying foreign taxes on that dollar on income tax, then you may be qualified to take a dollar for dollar credit in the US so that you're not being hit on both sides. And then you always want to look to income tax treaties. So what is that? Basically, numerous countries around the world have treaties, whether they're bilateral, multilateral, with other countries. And some of those provisions may contemplate income tax. And so what it's trying to do basically is source that income to one of the jurisdictions so that it's not taxed in both. And it may also give certain favorable rates or exemptions or credits with regard to the treaty. So you always want to be mindful that there could be an income tax treaty in place as well. So the point here is when you're kind of viewing your income coming from foreign sources, you want to look first at whether you have earned income exclusion. Can you take that exclusion on certain foreign income? You want to look at your foreign tax credits. Can you offset some of it with that, as well as income tax treaty relief, if there may be some available. Okay, so a little bit further into that on the foreign earned income side, basically, these are the requirements here, the qualifiers. I won't go through all of this due to time, but I'll just sort of high level it for you. Basically, it looks to see if you're a qualified eligible taxpayer. What that means is that either you have a bona fide residency abroad, meaning you have like a permanent home abroad where you intend on being permanently outside the US, and they'll look to facts. They'll look to, your visa status, your driver's license, where is your employment, where are your bank accounts, to show indicia of that permanent residency that's abroad. Or if perhaps I'm not permanent outside the US, I'm temporary, I'm on a work assignment outside the US, then they look to the physical presence test. And that is, as it states here, whether or not you're at least 330 full days during a 12-month period outside the US. So that's really, looking specifically at days. And again, look to income tax treaties as well to define different things such as this as well. So assuming that you meet that qualification, then they look at the exemption. The exemption is specific, like I said, to labor, services, self-employment, things that are abroad that are from what I like to call active business activity. In other words, passive income, such as even rental income, which we're going to talk about here with real estate, or 401ks, or other similar types of interest, dividends, capital gains. Anything passive, that's not going to qualify for this exclusion. Therefore, you could look to the foreign tax credit. We already talked a little bit about that, the dollar for dollar if you paid foreign tax on that. So you can look at that and say, okay, well, if I can't get the earned income exclusion, maybe I could take a foreign tax credit, or maybe you take the exclusion, then on top of that, you do the credit as well. You have to be careful, though, because the credit only applies above that threshold mark if you're using it for the exclusion, and it's done based on a formula. One thing to bear in mind here is always states. Even though we're talking federal, you also have to think about, your residency or your domicile. Where are you from? What state are you from? And what are their rules? Because there are circumstances where that state, even though you're abroad, may say, no, you're still here because you have certain ties. And therefore, they may attempt to tax you as well. Most of those states aren't going to allow foreign tax credits. So then you have to look back at the earned income exclusion. A lot of those states will apply that because they start with federal. So in addition to those reporting requirements with income tax, and I just want to throw this in here quickly, you've got, and I'm sure everybody's heard of these terms, FBAR, FATCA. Basically what these are additional reporting requirements. It's not that, in this case, it's not that you have to necessarily pay a tax on these reporting requirements, but there's substantial penalties if you do not report. And so what are these? Well, FBAR is dealing with the Department of Treasury. FATCA deals specifically with the IRS. What it's dealing with, for example, with FBAR, they're looking at foreign bank accounts. They're looking at, local funds, retirement plans, local meaning foreign, pension systems. And what they're saying is if you have more than 10,000 in value in a year in those accounts, you need to be reporting those on an FBAR, that form 114 annually. And that could be, you have to look at it in the aggregate. So if you have one account that has 6,000, another account that has 6,000, both foreign accounts, that counts. It's going to be in the aggregate, and it's going to be during the full year. So you got to look at all your ins and outs and how much did you have there? Did you meet that threshold? FATCA is looking more at your asset side. So it's looking at foreign stocks, securities, even potentially real estate, foreign interests that you have in different entities. And again, it has certain thresholds. So in that case, it's a sliding scale. It's not specifically a 10,000 mark. Instead, there it looks at, where is your residency? What is your filing status? Jointly, married, filing jointly or separate. And so those thresholds could be anywhere from 50,000 in value overseas of assets to 400,000, depending on the qualifiers. But bottom line is, if you meet these qualifiers, then you're required to report as well, or there could be substantial penalties on that as well. So query, as we're going through this to yourself, do I hold funds in foreign bank accounts? Maybe you hold the funds even for purchasing the real estate, or the proceeds after selling it, I have it in a foreign bank, or rental income on that foreign property. Yeah, that's in a foreign account. Or I have real estate held in foreign vehicles because maybe the country requires that. So those are instances where you have to contemplate whether the FBAR and FATCA are required. So now let's get into actual real estate. So now we're talking about foreign real estate. Basically, with the foreign real estate, what you want to look at is whether you have personal residency or rental property. So in other words, what is your use? And you'll see here in these qualifiers, I won't spell them out due to time, but if you have a personal residence, meaning that basically you're using it more than 14 days and only renting it less than 2 weeks, then that's going to be considered a personal resident, which means you don't necessarily have to file for those 14 days, let's say, that you rented it as far as income tax. However, your deductions are also limited. And they're limited like they'd be in the US to a certain extent, like it would be on, mortgage interest. But there's a lot of things that it would not qualify for on deductions. So like utilities, maintenance, insurance, you don't get to take those deductions, or foreign property taxes, at least through 2025. Now, if you're rental property overseas, so that means that, you're never in the property, let's say, and you rent it even for 1 day. Or as you can see here, there's different thresholds. The owner used the property for more than 14 days and rented it for more than 14 days, and so on. If that is the case where you have rental activity, well, then that rental property owned by a U.S. citizen is going to be subject to U.S. taxation on that income. So that is reportable. But you can take deductions on that. So you can look at, taking all those ones we talked about, from insurance premiums to advertising expenses, utilities, maintenance, all similar things that you would do in the US, where you're using it as truly a rental property. You want to allocate those, though. If you're using it for personal use over a certain amount of time, you also have to make sure those expenses are properly allocated between personal use and rental use. FTCs may come into play here, where you paid foreign tax on that income. You should be able to qualify for an offsetting US credit on that foreign tax paid, up to a certain amount. Foreign taxes are a little tricky. There's a lot behind them, but bottom line is there are limitations to your foreign tax credits. Really what the US is trying to do is get you to be equal in the tax rate that you're using. So in other words, in the foreign country, if you pay 20% on the tax, hypothetically, in the US, maybe your tax rate is 30%. Well, then that foreign tax credit is going to be that difference they're going to say you still owe in the US. So you can, in that case, you would shelter 20% of it with credit, but the US is going to say, yeah, but you got to pay on the other 10%, because you would if you were here in the US. So there are limitations to it. It's very complicated, but something to get a tax advisor involved in. And then you look to treaties as well. Those can control on rental income situations if there are treaties in place. Sale of the foreign real estate, yes. If you're a US citizen, you are taxed on the sale of foreign real estate. The character of that, whether it's long-term, short-term, depends on your holding periods, as it shows here. If it's held for more than 1 year, you're long-term, less than 1 year, short-term. Same as US principles. Same with the primary resident exemption that might apply as well overseas on that property if it's your primary residence. 1031 exchanges, so like-kind exchanges. I sell this and I take the proceeds from it and I put it into a like-kind foreign property. That can be permitted. 1031s are very complicated. You want to get somebody involved with it. Bottom line with those is it's got to be foreign to foreign on the property, not US to foreign. So you want to look at your like-kind exchanges and make sure it's a foreign property for foreign property. It can be different countries, but it's got to be foreign to foreign. And again, foreign tax credits can apply here with the capital gains that you may incur. So if you're paying capital gains in the foreign jurisdiction, you may be able to get an offsetting FTC here in the US on that. And again, look to your income tax treaties to see if they control on capital gains. So let's go to another subject. So US gift and estate tax. So you're a US citizen. That means that you're subject, we already talked about this, you're subject worldwide generally. So that also means on inheritance taxes, you are required to pay US federal and possibly state inheritance tax when it comes to your property. So that means any asset owned by a US citizen located anywhere, it may be subject to the US inheritance tax. So on the gift side, that means if you're a US donor and you're gifting property, then you would pay taxes on the gift tax if it is above either the annual exemption, which we'll talk about, or the lifetime credit amount. If you're a foreign national, so you're a foreign donor not domiciled in the US, and you gift non-US property, that generally wouldn't be subject to gift tax. Now, if you're gifting US property, that's different, even if you're a foreign donor. Estate taxes. So there's all the different hypotheticals here. US expat inherits, foreign property abroad from a foreign relative. In that case, is it reportable if the estate is valued above 100,000? Is there income tax? There could be if that property is generating income. So in other words, maybe it's something you inherit and you're actually generating something from it. On the taxation of foreign property, so that means that the foreign estate will not be subject to US taxes. Thus, the inheritance tax passes from a foreign person to a US citizen tax-free. And there is no capital gains on the disposition. This is US expats that are inheriting from the foreign relative. If the property generates foreign income, like we said, that would be taxable. However, you may be able to offset that with the exclusion that we talked about or the FTCs. Now, US expats inherit property from US relatives. Is it reportable? Inheritance left by deceased US citizens are subject to estate taxes. The estate tax, you report that in 706, and the estate would do that on both US property and foreign property. If there's income being generated from that, then that's reported as well on 1041. As you can see here, the rates, 2024 give anywhere from 18 to 40% on that. And in 2026, it's actually increasing. So if you have a US expat that's transferring property to a foreign person, then the estate must report the transfers of estate property to US or non-US persons. And the US federal estate tax applies to the estate regardless of the nationality of the recipient. So fine. So we talked a little bit about who's got to report, who's got to pay tax. But with that said, there's still the unified credit. Just the same principles as in the US on that. So what that means is that you can pretty much transfer now up to 18,000, right, as annual gifts per donee. So that means literally you can have 5 donees hypothetically and give each of them 18,000 of value or cash, and that would meet the annual gift tax exclusion. So that's non-taxable. If you transfer to a US citizen spouse, that's a full exclusion, not taxable. If it's a non-US citizen spouse, there are limitations to that. So it's 185,000 this year. Now on the estate tax exemption, that's much higher, as you can see here. In 2024, it's 13.6 million or 27.2 million if you're married, filing jointly. So those are your amounts. So you could still do quite a bit of transferring before you're going to actually be hit with a tax on it. With that said, that's going to sunset. So 2025 is the last year. So in 2026, it's going to go back to pre 2018 years. And so you're looking at, they say it's 5 million, but then it's indexed for inflation. So let's say about 7 million or 14 million if you're married. So you can see a big difference there. So today, 27 million you could transfer. 2026, 14 million. So that's why you may hear a lot about, individuals that are doing certain planning to see what they can do. One last thing to talk about is the foreign death tax credit. So that's where, okay, John, fine. I have to pay tax in the US. Maybe I can shelter it with a unified credit. Maybe I have too much, enough assets that it goes above that. Well, if you're paying foreign taxes on that, estate taxes, then you may be able to qualify for what's similar to a foreign tax credit. In other words, a dollar for dollar in the US that, hey, look, I paid in the local country. Do I still have to pay in the US? And the answer may be not if you can get this foreign death tax credit. So I know that's a lot of information, and I apologize for going so fast through it, but I just want to try to get in the different elements, whether it's, dealing with the income side, disposition of the properties, or on the estate side. So I hope that was helpful.
It was helpful, John. Thank you so much. I mean, we've all traveled into it's a real thing, and the IRS will find you. Learn. Thank you so much, John. So our last presenter, another friend. He's originally from Naples, Florida, where he first took an interest in the legal profession after volunteering with at various corporate and civil litigation firms, working on a variety of civil, corporate, and business-related matters. Also at a boutique intellectual property firm in South Florida, where he was responsible and enforcement of more than 500 trademark applications. During this time, he was responsible for courts and tribunals. So Benjamin's going to talk a little bit about structuring your business enterprise if you are
All right. Andre, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. Benjamin Bedrava. I'm a corporate attorney here at EPGD Business Law. We are a full service transactional and business litigation firm. So one of the areas that we specialize in is helping clients set up their companies, their corporate structures, and more than anything, deciding, do I need a company? Should I have a company? What does that even look like for my investment? Anything that you're going to do, that you're going to put money in, whether we're talking about opening up a franchise, starting a business, whether it's a Amazon storefront or buying a piece of real estate, it's an investment, and you want to do what you can to protect those things. So first, when we're talking about what we need to do, what we need to know, we've got to look at kind of these initial considerations of where in the Caribbean are you looking to purchase? So every conversation that you're going to have, whether it's with an attorney or other advisor as you're moving forward with this decision, you've got to be able to set that stage. So where in the Caribbean you guys decide to invest, whether it's to move or have an investment property, they're going to have different laws or restrictions on who can own the property, what regulatory hoops you're going to need to jump to, and some are just going to be more friendly and open to others. Take St. Martin, for example, that Andre mentioned. They are very arms wide open to accepting foreign investors that are interested in buying property, that are interested in coming and working opening businesses, they've got a motivation, but not all islands are and countries are going to be like that. Then you want to look at what kind of property are you looking to purchase. Now, many of these places are going to have different restrictions, different requirements based on whether we're talking about residential property, commercial property, or if the property is inland or on the water. It may sound strange, but there are additional requirements for foreign individuals in many of these venues if you're going to be buying, say, beachfront property. And part of that, I'd imagine, is many of these places, their island, their economy is based on the beach. It's based on the water, the tourism, and they have a very strong interest in protecting that. And so if you're going to buy property that's going to, let's say, touch on that tourism, they want to make sure that you're going to comply with those regulations. And then how are you going to use the property? So if you're going to use this property personally, maybe this is going to be a residence, or if it's going to be rented out to third parties. If you're going to use this to operate a business or to lease to other commercial enterprises, that's going to affect what kind of laws or restrictions you're looking at and what's ultimately going to be the best structure for you. And the last bit is, what is it that you're actually purchasing? That may sound silly. You're telling me, I'm buying a piece of property in the Caribbean. Well, are you buying the property or are you buying a company that owns the property? It's very common in these situations for these properties to be held just as you may do in a holding company. And because of the way that property taxes and other transfer taxes may operate, oftentimes the owners of those properties will have held that property in a company, and when they sell, they'll want to sell the entire company along with it, which means that you're going to be getting not only a piece of property, but you could also be getting all of the skeletons that come with the business, good or bad. So when we're buying something through an entity, we've got to talk about what that looks like and why we'd want to do it. When you're looking at buying something in the Caribbean and you're saying, should I do this myself or buy it through a company? Well, some of the reasons that you might lean towards a business or other entity are to have those limited liability protections, asset protection for yourself, for your other companies, estate planning benefits. We may set up a company that has succession language so that if something were to happen, the unfortunate came, it's already put in place who's going to take over that business from you. They have language that the shares will be taken over by either maybe it's your child or it's going to be transferred into your trust. And likewise, if you have a trust that owns the property, then the trust will continue to own the property no matter what happens. The beneficiaries, the trustees will change over time, but that property will always be held by the trust, and there will always be that level of continuity that you'll be able to set what you want to happen with those things going forward. Like we talked about earlier, there may be tax benefits to owning this through a business. That could be anything from, say, this is a rental property. Having this company owned or own your residence may allow you to expense certain costs of maintaining the property, anything from, say, cleaning in between tenants to some of the maintenance and upkeep. Privacy. Now, not everyone wants people to know that they own this property. Not everyone wants people to know who's behind this business. So in many cases, when we have someone who's concerned with privacy, whether it is just general business privacy, or maybe they have something that is a little bit more untoward, where they have someone who they specifically want to prevent from being able to locate, whether it's their new home or just an asset that they have. We could put that property in the name of one of these entities, and depending on how it's set up, it may be very difficult or just outright impossible through typical public records to discover who the ultimate owner is. business planning. What do I mean by that? Now, if you're going to buy this property, you might be thinking, I'd love to buy a beachfront property. I want one that's going to have many rooms for guests, that's going to have a big open layout. The downside is the property I want is going to be more than my budget. So we and our best friends are going to go in on buying this property together. Whether it's to live in or to rent out, we're going to do that because we have everything going well between us. Well, we can set this up as a business. We can establish ways for you to decide how decisions are going to be made, who has control to handle day to day, who is going to be able to make decisions about who can use the property or when. What'll happen with profits? Say we're going to rent out this property when no one's using it. Very common. You buy a property in the Caribbean, but you're not yet ready to commit to having that be your full-time residence. So we're going to use that for a few weeks here or there. And in the meantime, we want to be able to rent it out and make a profit back from it so that it is cash positive. It's not just an expense that we poured all of our retirement life savings into. And the last part is management of the property and the expenses. So when you're not there, who's taking care of this property? Well, now if we have, say, a company, we could hire an employee, or the company could hire a property manager who's going to take care of any maintenance, any expenses that come up, whether it is simply for when you're not there, having somebody who's got an extra set of eyes, to if you're renting it out, somebody who can handle that turnover. And then you can use the profits that are being generated or the money that's in the company to pay that manager and use that as an expense or a possible deduction. The types of entities that you can own a property through are pretty broad. In most countries down in the Caribbean, there are very few restrictions. Now, some countries don't recognize certain types of entities. For example, trusts. Trusts are not a common thing in other parts of the world. The US, we all love trusts. When someone says, I've got a will, the first question the attorney asks is, yeah, but do you have a trust? Trusts are really great tools for estate planning. And if you have significant funds for creating, say, generational wealth or assets that can pass on and continue to build off of each other. But unfortunately, not everywhere will acknowledge or accept a trust. So if you're thinking, I already have a trust that's in place, you want to take a look at what are the requirements of the local jurisdiction where you're planning to buy. Will they acknowledge a U.S. trust? And if so, what other restrictions will I have on what things will need to be signed, what kind of registrations will need to be done? Or should I be setting up a trust in that jurisdiction that may be tied back to my U.S. trust, but that won't have any sort of problems with holding the property? Same is said for companies. So your typical US company is often going to be an LLC or a corporation. Which way you decide to go, that's often going to be a tax planning question, either with your tax attorney or your CPA, and then a decision about how you want things to be structured. As far as most of the Caribbean countries go, they all have very similar and mirrored corporate forms to what you would typically think of as a traditional US LLC or corporation. No, not necessarily. And of course, each one of these is going to be subject to different laws in that jurisdiction, but you may be able to circumvent some of the requirements that they may have for foreign individuals by setting up a local entity, even if you then hold that in your US company. We'll talk about some of those common structures. Some of the liabilities that you guys are going to come up against when you're setting up your company, that's going to give you those basic limited liability protections. So we create essentially that barrier in between yourself personally and your personal assets and the assets of the business. So typically that would mean if there was a claim against the property or the business, that's only going to be able to be resolved within the scope of what that business owns. So typically that'd be whatever that property is, and that's it. It's not going to come up to you, your personal accounts, your retirement, or otherwise. When we've got these companies set up, we can also help avoid disputes between the partners or easily resolve those. So depending on where we set up the entity, what we put in our partnership agreements, such as the governing law and venue, we can set the stage for any sort of disagreements we may have. Many people, if they're going to buy this property with anyone other than themselves, will prefer to create a U.S. entity, even if that then owns a foreign company. Why? Because your partnership can be structured in the U.S. entity. Any disputes can go under U.S. laws, which are fairly robust when it comes to these kinds of disagreements. And it's a little bit less of the wild, wild west that you may come across in certain other jurisdictions where there's a little less certainty and a little less formality. Insurance. It might sound common, but you've got to make sure you're maintaining adequate coverage. And that should be something that you do through the business or through that entity. So if you have any sort of commercial activity or you are going to use it as an investment property, that becomes all the more important. And then your legal compliance. You've got local laws, local regulations. And so as a best practice, you're going to want to make sure that you are following whatever restrictions or requirements. And your attorney, your real estate professionals, they can help guide you through some of that. Now, one of the last things we want to touch on is registration. So some of these countries will require that you register before you can purchase. So for example, the Bahamas, most foreigners will need to register with the Bahamas Investment Authority in connection with any sort of real estate acquisition. In the context of companies, in some cases, that could be similar to what you would do to register a foreign company to do business in the state of, but in this case, we're talking about in that particular jurisdiction of that island or that country. In others, it's going to be a bit more formal of a regulatory approval, especially when we're talking about something, say, on the water. As we mentioned, most of those jurisdictions are very protective of their beaches and those natural resources. Now, some of the common structures that we'll talk about, and you should keep in mind, are we can own this starting from left to right. We're a U.S. individual. We can have a U.S. company. Say we've got partners. We want to have all the profits or any benefits come up through the U.S. Any disputes happen here. And then that U.S. company can own the property. Now we can also go the other route where we set up a local entity. Now, if we're going to be moving to this jurisdiction, that's going to become our permanent residence. It's probably going to be simpler for you to maintain an entity locally. If you're no longer tied back to the US, you don't necessarily want to be hailed into court in the US. You don't necessarily want to have reporting requirements in the US. You might want to assimilate and have everything be local to that jurisdiction. So we can form a company locally and then use that to buy the property. Now, kind of a hybrid is we can have a US company, say we're going to have other individuals involved, or we have a US trust. The US trust could own our shares in the company or be the beneficiary if something were to happen of those shares. But then that US company owns an entity in the jurisdiction. And when it does that, now we have a local company. We circumvent many of those registration requirements, depending on your jurisdiction. And we can purchase that property and be able to operate it, whether it's for commercial purposes, rental, or just to serve as your residence. And then one of the last is to use a trust. Now, trusts can be used, as we mentioned, in conjunction with companies, both in the US or locally. And the trust can also be created under US law, or it could be created under the laws of the jurisdiction where the property is located. So that's all going to depend on whether or not the jurisdiction recognizes trusts and will recognize US trusts based on how you've established it. But many Caribbean countries have very robust trust laws now. And so even if they are not necessarily as favorable towards US trusts, there are simple ways that you can work with an attorney to get one set up that'll be recognized in that jurisdiction. Say, for example, the British Virgin Islands. That's often used as a haven for many trusts. But where you ultimately set it up, that's going to be something that you'll want to ask yourself, do I have other assets that I want to put into this trust, and where are those located? If you have many other assets in the US, might be simpler for you to set it up here. But if you're moving your whole life down there, well, then you may very well want to just put everything down, say, in that country. Say we're going to put it all in the Bahamas and have everything be able to be resolved there without having to come back to the US if anything were to happen to enforce it. But depending on what you guys decide to do, there's a lot of different structures that are out there. It really just depends on what your goals are, what your plan for the property is, how you plan to use it, and where you want to go next. Andre?
Can you all hear me?
There we go.
Okay. Thank you. The chat for all of you all. Okay, no one can hear us. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can I hear me in the chat? Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. You're just cutting in and out.
I don't see any. Benjamin, why don't they can hear you clearly? Why don't you say goodbye to these folks for us, okay?
Absolutely. Well, I would love to thank every single one of you guys for coming. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us that if you guys have questions, you have specific concerns, please reach out. I know that the Chamber and Julie will be circulating a lot of our contact information as well. If you don't have any, just touch base and you can get it. And, you know, if it's something of jumping on a call to walk you through it, come up with a proposal, see what the strategy might look like for your next steps, you know, that's what we're here for. Chamber is doing a lot of really exciting activities, and the goal is to help educate all of our colleagues, all of our professionals and members of the community to the greatest extent possible. You know, it's not about us and business. It's about making sure that everyone is informed and knows the right questions to ask. And hopefully we've given you all a lot to think about and given you all just enough so that once you're ready to take that plunge, you know some questions to ask, and you can make progress with achieving your Caribbean dream. But thank you guys again. Andre, John, thank you guys. And you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. You'll be receiving an email too with all the contact information. So just
Thanks, guys.
hold out for that.
All right. Take care, guys. Talk to you soon.